I know we've been working on some stuff. I've made some little notes as we go here for some of you when we're building the notes and kind of let you on your own. I just wanted to take a little bit of time today. A little bit of time today, a little bit of time the next time we meet to give some hints on some things that might be good also. Just regular studying, okay? So I'm going to rewind a little bit here to start. I see my first section's equations. What I normally do if I'm making myself notes, and this is me for a long time since I was back in school too, I would take whatever I had and I'd start to look at the places and say, okay, what do I need to know in general? Then I'll get some specifics. And so one of the things I did when I did your guys' notes initially, and I got fresh ones of these on the back table if you need them as well, was I would jump in and the bare base, oh my gosh, bare basics, Hardy's doing weird stuff already. That's a division sign. I'd get my opposites written down, because I'm going to need those on any equation no matter what it is. What's the opposite of plus? Minus. What's the opposite of times? Divide. And vice versa. Then I would go in and I'd start looking for issues or questions or equations that I thought were going to have issues that I might have a problem with. As I mentioned before we started the video, I also, and I wish I would have done this on the note sheet when I made them originally, was make those separation lines a little bit thicker. Again, I've got markers and colored pencils and stuff in the back. And I also, my one other thing would be, in any particular section, I wouldn't make more than 4 boxes or 4 examples. Otherwise, it gets too crowded. So I'm just going to split this, kind of looking like a window. And so now I've got to decide, okay, if I'm only going to put 4 problems in here, I probably am not going to want the simplest ones. I'm probably going to want ones where I'm seeing a little bit of everything. So I start to look, maybe on my review even, and I'm going, ooh, fractions. Okay, I don't like fractions. So maybe I should put a fraction on there. So I take one of my examples, and maybe you pick a different one that you think is going to cause you trouble. I don't know. And I'm going to write it in there. Now, instead of doing all my steps in black or whatever it is you're using, personally, I like to change colors here, because that way I can look and go, okay, what's my opposite for the plus 6? Oh, it's minus. And I can see the step better if I do it in color. Another good reason for picking this particular problem is I saw my opposite with plus and minus. And now I see divide, because that's all a fraction is. So the opposite of divide is to multiply. And I go ahead and I get that in there. So that gets me a couple of my opposites. That's a basic. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And so I start looking again on that first page. I'm like, okay, what else is different that could cause me an issue? So I look, I'm like, ooh, variables on both sides. Okay, let's get one of those in here. So I'm not having to go anywhere and create problems or do anything like that. I'm just taking what's on the review because the teacher knows what's on the final. And I get that in there. So I'm like, okay, maybe I use a different color this time. But my first job here, since I have A's on both sides, maybe I make myself an extra little note in my little quadrant. I'm like, hey, I got to make sure I get all the A's to one side first. and I can do my opposite. So I add that over. And then I start doing my normal thing. Undo the plus 2. And the opposite of multiply is to divide. So you start to see I've got layers of help waiting for me. I have examples of all my opposites. I've got one of those, and I'm like, oh, let's see. What else could we run into that would be different? So I start to look, I flip over my sheet, I'm like, okay, I did like terms, I did opposite. Ooh, parentheses. We gotta play parentheses here. So I grab one of my parenthesis problems. And I get that in there, and I go, okay, let's change colors here again. We've got to do some distributing. So again, distribute is multiplying. And you're back again where you've started on all of these. Get those in. And divide. And I've got that. And so I'm like, okay, now technically I've only got one box left. But I notice I've still got this area on the side if I really needed it for something. And so I'm like, all right, what have we got left here? Let's keep looking through the review. Oh, those crazy fraction problems. Yeah, I probably should get one of those. So I'm trying to find one that doesn't look awful. So I get that written in. And maybe I'm sitting there and I'm wondering, I don't remember exactly how to do this stuff anyway, which is why we're putting it down, right? So reminder, we're just taking those numbers that are in the denominator and we're multiplying them together. And that's what we're going to multiply all the way through by. That works every time. Even if something's not a fraction, I'm going to multiply this through. So the first one, okay, that's pretty easy. When I get to the second part, this is where confusions kind of come with some of you before. And so when I look at this, I go, okay, you multiply by the number on the top and you divide by the number on the bottom. So I literally, if I wanted to, could do 6 times 8 and then divide by 3. I'm going to go grab the other calculator here in a minute because it works easier. Or I could just put the fraction in parentheses and I get the same thing. So either way, I get the minus 16. So while you're waiting on me to grab the calculator, you try doing that with the negative 7 halves before I get something that lights up a little bit better and see how that might be working. Tune this down a little. All right, so let's see get this back in here. So 6 times -7 divided by 2. So I'd still have to remind myself somehow how that works. Because if you look at it and you don't know how you got from here to here or here to here, this isn't going to be real useful. But if I do remember, then I can just do my opposites. And it's okay if when I get to that last step, and we've seen this before, if it comes out a decimal, you can go to the decimal or you can just leave it as the fraction even. That's fine. So now I've got 4 examples completely worked out that do just about everything I could run into. So I'm hoping I don't see a whole lot more in my packet that I would want on here because I'm not sure what I'm going to do. And I look and I'm like, oh, crud. Proportions. I forgot proportions. Okay. Like I said, we still got room here. We could even do it up here. Might be better to just do it up here. So if I grab a proportion problem, looks like the last type we're going to need. And I remind myself, we're going to cross multiply with both of these. Okay, that's the way these set up every time. So we multiply that out. Work on getting my n term by itself. In retrospect, I think I'd have rather done it on the edge, but that's okay. So I will take this opportunity to make note of one other thing for those of you that are kind of building as you go. On the back of your note sheet in that last quadrant, it just says other examples. It's not titled. So maybe if you're like, I like mine to be a little neater than this one that looks like it's kind of smashed on the top, you could flip over to the back and in one of your little quadrants in there, you could put this problem in there. So it was a little less squished here. But this is basically what I would run all the way through. So you're like, okay, equations, Hardy, that was a little slow. That took some time. It did, but it's also going to get me what I need when I need it. So, inequalities. Okay, I got to grab my next one here. So inequalities, there's equation stuff, there's graphing stuff. What else have I got in here? The whole, oh yeah, the whole and or thing. Graphic, okay. So, couple things. I would put this on its own, just the math part here, because you'll notice when you flip over, graphing inequalities is on the back. So I got more room for these. So, 2 things we'll note. If you're going to have things in different parts, it's wise to let yourself know that they're there. So you're not looking at inequalities while you're taking the final and going, crap, I wish I had done something with the graphing. Well, you did. You just put it in a different spot. So, again, I'm going to start grabbing. Once I split this in 4, I'm going to always grab a couple of simple ones and then go back and do the other ones later. So I look, I'm like, okay, this is like an equation. I get that on a side by itself. I'm good to go. So I'm like, okay, well, that wasn't bad. Like I said, I'm going to do my graphing stuff later, so I don't really need to put a graph right here. I'm just trying to solve. And so I find me, let's see, we got all those. We did a fraction over there. Distributed property. Yeah, that's probably a good idea too. Let's try, grab one of these. We know whenever we got this, we got to distribute. So we'll do that first. Negative times negative, it's positive. And at first you may be like, well, I got one right over here like this. Why would I add this particular one? You're about to see. This is where when you kind of learn things from people who have seen it and done it before, it pays off because they help you avoid some of the pitfalls that you may run into on your own, which isn't always a bad thing. So my last step here. I'm dividing both sides by -2 to get n alone. Reminder. I've got to flip the arrow when I divide by a negative. Having the ability to write little notes on the edge like that so you don't look later and go, well, why the heck did this arrow flip and go the other way? Did I do something wrong? Did I look at it incorrectly? You don't know. And so giving yourself little problems and little notes like that you may have seen can come in really handy as you're working through these. What else have we got here? Oh, yeah. So we got these compound ones, these big ones, these 3-parters. That's not a terrible thing to get in there either. So with the 3-parters, we're trying to get x alone in the middle. So we're still doing the opposites like we are right here. And the other thing that is cool about making a note sheet like this, again, even if I wasn't giving you one and kind of telling you to use it on a test, as you prepare this, you're practicing again and seeing the stuff. I have so many people that'll say, I made the note sheet and I didn't even need it because I'd done so much practice and seeing the things as I created it that it went into my brain, and now I'm not even having to think twice. I just do it naturally, which is an awesome, awesome thing. Now, in looking through, let me look one more time, through my packet, as far as just solving inequalities, that looks like the only 3 there are. So for now, at least, I'm going to leave that blank. But if I find something later, maybe I'll come back and I'll do it and kind of see how that's working. So let's see. I only want to do one more section today because I think we're going to break this up a little more. I want to do angles. I'm going to fast forward ahead a little bit. I will post my note sheet later So if you want to kind of just look at mine and say, like, you know, Hart knows what he's doing, I'm just going to copy his. You can. I still think it's better for you to look through some on your own, though. So angles. So I start looking through my review again. I'm like, oh yeah, complementary, supplementary, vertical. I kind of need to know what these words mean so I know what I'm trying to do. So first job. Let's see, do I want to put that? I think I do. I'm going to keep it outside the box. I want my examples inside. So complementary, which is when we have the little right angle thingy. Is 90 degrees. So I'm looking at my sheet here again. Hopefully I've been doing them along with us as we go. Supplementary, when your two parts make a straight line, is 180. Maybe we should even say the add part, so we remember the add stuff. And then finally, we have vertical angles that are equal to each other. And they're always across from each other as well. So that, to me, that tells me the verbiage, so I understand the words. And so now my thing would become, okay, I want to make sure that when I'm doing these, I've got at least one of each of these in there. So let's see, let's find a complementary here. Again, I'm stealing these right off the review. And so I see the right angle, which means these two got to equal up to 90. And if you've been doing the ones that we do together in class each day, you probably have most of the... Oh, what am I doing? I want to solve for x. Why am I boxing in 50? But you probably have worked out problems that are ready to go. It's just you transferring them over here. And you might even want to find some that look a little bit different. Like instead of going the most simplistic, maybe you even go and you're like, okay, when I flipped over, here's a supplementary. And so you're like, okay, so 2x plus x plus 24. As we said, they add up to 180. Just those little details that you now are going to have sitting right in front of you. And we just can do our opposites as we work our way towards finding our x value. Now, even though there is a chance, there is an opportunity that all you are going to need to find is x, and that wouldn't be degrees, I would take advantage, and it just happens that I have a little bit of space here to the right. I would go ahead and find out what the two angle measures were, because I could get asked. So I'd be like, okay, so 2 times 52 is 104, and 52 plus 24 is 76, and I can make sure they add up to 180. Make sure that I'm doing them correctly. So there's lots of ways to get little bonuses out of what you're doing. So we've done complementary, we've done supplementary. Okay, I need a vertical. I'm going to steal this right off there too. That's a W. So just like we've done on the other ones, vertical angles are equal. So those are going to be equal. Every section almost that we do on this review, getting ready for the final, is going to go back to the equation one. And as we did when we were working on the other ones, maybe I make myself a little note here and I go, okay, if I know what W is, I'm going to substitute that in for W. And I see that they're the same thing. It's a way for me to double check my work and make sure that I'm in good shape. And again, that's the three main things with the angles. Maybe I don't need the fourth one, or maybe as we're doing some of the other stuff, you find something you want to put in. So, just something to consider. So, with that, we are going to cut off or end our first work with the notes. Like I said, we will fire this back up the next time we meet, as we're kind of working. I might post a little more of mine a little later in the day. We'll see. But do be working on this to get that advantage on the final.